Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 154. My name is NBZ and I'm woken up very early this morning. I don't know why. I woke up at like 8 a.m. I had a cup of tea. I sat down. I read 150 pages of a book sitting in a really nice chair. It was a good morning, I have to say.
How long does 150 pages take you?
So there's a website, before we get onto this tangent. Hi, this is Bally. This is my co-host. Hi, Bally. Welcome to the show.
Hi, MVZ. I'm very well.
Good.
Continue your tangent.
So there's a website. So you know how we are very obsessed with how long it takes us to beat video games and things like that.
And listen to podcasts and listen to watch videos and play games.
See how much time it all takes, etc. So there's the website which is How Long to Beat, which tells you how long to beat a video game. There's also a website that I discovered when I started getting back into reading this year called readinglength.com, which tells you, you can type in like your words per minute, like how long it takes you to read, and it will calculate an hour count for how long it'll take you to read a book. So that's what I have been doing and checking, like, well, how many words is this book? Because pages is a bad representation because there's lots of different editions of books, like a Kindle edition and a paperback and a hardback all have different number of pages. So word count is the thing you go by. And so, for me, about like a couple hours or so usually. It depends on the book. It depends on the writing style. So like Robert Jordan, who writes the Wheel of Time series, or wrote, he's, passed away a while ago now. His books are much denser and harder to get through, like Tolkien is, so that'll take me longer to read 150 pages, whereas Brandon Sanderson, who I started reading this book like a few days ago, and I'm on page like 370 or something, so he's much more digestible and easier. So I feel like I go faster, even though the word count is probably similar.
Right.
Depends on the style of writing.
Yeah. No, but I'm about a page a minute or slightly slower than that almost, so it probably took me like a good 2.5 hours to read.
And like, of course, none of this takes into account the fact that you'll often, your mind will wander off for a second. Like, I need to go back and reread it.
Sometimes you just have to have a reset. I'm just going to read that page again and just get back on track.
I've enjoyed reading this year a lot because it's one of the rare things I do where I just focus on that thing and I don't multitask because I can't. Like, I can't listen to stuff and read. I have to be, that's the only thing.
Yeah. I need to get back into some reading.
You should, and we should do a podcast about some books.
Yeah,
that would be good at some point. Anyway, this is not a podcast about books. This is a podcast about video games, mainly Nintendo video games. And we're going to talk about a lot of them because there's some things that we have gotten to, some new things, and also some things being finished up for both of us. So, Bally, before we get into it, do you want to tell people what to expect for the rest of the show today?
Today is going to be a 2-segment show. Our first segment is going to be the games that we have been playing, and our second segment is our 7th Backlog Club, I believe it is, and that is Wave Race 64. So we've both been playing a bit of Wave Race. We're going to go deep on that game in the second segment, and it's just going to be a 2-segment show.
Absolutely. Good stuff. So let's, waste no more time and get into it, Bally. You finished up Link's Awakening. Last time we spoke, a couple of dungeons deep.
I wrapped
so you
up
hadn't really got that far, and I had finished it, of course, but you've gone through and done the deed now.
I really enjoyed this game. It's a fairly easy Zelda in the sense like I've already played Link's Awakening and stuff was gradually coming back to me. The first 6 dungeons, I should say, are fairly straightforward. And then there's just that massive difficulty spike with Eagle's Tower. And at the time I played Eagle's Tower, I thought it was tough, but like I said last time, first time I played Link's Awakening, I was very strict about not using a guide. And now my sort of gaming tastes, I kind of go to a guide a bit quicker than I used to, perhaps. And from that perspective, I think Eagle's Tower stuck out a lot more to me this time, where I had maybe slightly less patience. And I don't think I did have to go to a guide once, but otherwise, like, it was pretty tough. And we were just talking about this on WhatsApp, but we think that I was just saying that dungeon is such a step up because it's not just like one new mechanic, it's like 3 new mechanics all layered on top of each other.
Yes. And like 2 of those mechanics, the ball and the column is something a lot of people I've heard talk about this game playing it for the first time had no idea that's what you're supposed to do. And to be granted, you wouldn't know that's what you're supposed to do without the owl statue to tell you. Another nugget that had popped up on a podcast I was listening to, apparently the original release of Link's Awakening didn't have those owl statues. Those were added for the DX release, which means that a bunch of people going through the very first iteration of this game would have really been stumbling in the dark, I feel, for a lot of these things, because especially in like Turtle Rock, there's a puzzle which, to get a key, requires you to kill the cannonball guys from above, from like a platform above. Like, how would you ever figure that out without that, aside from, I guess, the compass shows you where chests are supposed to be, so you would know you'd have to do something in that room to get a chest, right? Like, it's kind of baffling to me that you would have to figure that out without any direct indication, because so much of this stuff literally doesn't tell you unless you talk to the owl statue.
Yeah, so like the 3 mechanics were, colored switches, floors, like multiple floors of a dungeon, which this game really doesn't have much of. There's maybe like 1 or 2 extra floors on a couple of the early dungeons.
I mean, I think some of the dungeons do have that, but this is the first time where you can fall from one floor to the other floor. And you have to have like that space in your brain, like vertically and horizontally, and everything kind of mixed in
and it's just
your head.
all layered up, and it's just it's tough. And that's interesting what you say about the owl statues, because I actually think they are a fantastic part of Link's Awakening that I would welcome in other Zeldas personally. I don't think they're a fantastic part. I think they're a crutch. I think they're a crutch because, quite honestly, the things they tell you are not like hints. They're outright telling you what to do because the game design is bad. Some of them are more so than others, definitely.
Well,
some of them are more less direct.
Right. I feel like they're a hint system that had to be added because the game design was so bad in the first place. Like, the game design was so baffling that no one would figure it out without them, if you know what I mean.
I wouldn't call the game design bad.
You wouldn't call the game design bad when you go into a room and there are 3 enemies and there's no indication that you have to kill them in a specific order to get a key?
I mean,
like,
that's a very...
Imagine doing that in the first game without the owl statue.
I'd
like,
say
that
is quite
ridiculous.
A traditional kind of mechanic, and it has aged
in
badly.
What way? In what way? Like, and that's what I was talking about with video game.
In today's video game world, I agree, it's a bad mechanic. At the time, I think that's like just a part of video games at the time. Like there were just
right, but that doesn't
things.
Stop it being bad, right? Like, and I can sit here and say it is bad.
Currently, it is bad mechanic, yes. At the time, and those who love Link's Awakening for its nostalgia, I can see why they would say it's not a bad mechanic and it's just a product of the time. But no, and it's funny because, like, I think Eagle's Tower is very difficult and is a weak part of the game generally, and I thought that less so the first time I played this game, but Turtle Rock, in my view, I think is actually the best dungeon in the game, and I really, really enjoyed the level of difficulty without going to a guide for this dungeon. Like, it's long, it's hard, there are moments where you're like, what on earth are you meant to do here? But it kind of works itself out, and I just love that about it.
I think it's that idea of the dungeon puzzle as a whole, right? It's the exploration of finding where you need to go. It's the navigation puzzle, really, right? And I think it does that definitely a lot better than some other dungeons have done in this game, or even in maybe the Oracle games as well. It leads to a good level of challenge that isn't too overwhelming. There are certainly parts of it, and I got tripped up because I'm stupid. I went on the quest to get the boomerang and left my bow and arrow with the guy, and so I didn't realize in this game you could buy your bow and arrow back, because when I looked up online for old guides of Link's Awakening, it said that you have to always have something traded. So I was like, well, the boomerang's basically the bow and arrow, and the bow and arrow I haven't really had to use in any dungeon up till now, so is it necessary? Because you buy the bow and arrow, it's not an item you get in a dungeon. So I was like, is it necessary? And in Turtle Rock, it is necessary. You have to use it to get a key in that dungeon. So I had to traipse out, go and buy back my bow and arrow and all that stuff.
So in the original Zelda Link's Awakening, I should say, where you can't buy it back, what you meant to do?
You're supposed to do stuff like leave your shovel with him, because the shovel's kind of useless, unless...
But I'm saying if in the original Link's Awakening you leave your bow and arrow by accident because you don't know any better, and then you reach Turtle Rock, what do?
You can trade, so you'll have to trade it for another item. Basically, he always has to keep one of your items as opposed to you having them all. Oh man!
So you have to go all the way back and...
I just went all the way back and realised, I can just pay for it. So I paid 300 rupees and just got it back.
Got it.
So then I had all the items again.
Man, jeez. Yeah, but I think generally Turtle Rock is fantastic. I think this game is fantastic. I do really enjoy the first 6 dungeons as well. And I've just really enjoyed this remake.
How did you feel about the theming going forward? Because I know that's something you couldn't really speak on the first 2 dungeons or so.
It's better. I agree. Yeah, it is. It is a bit better. It is still jarring to me in that the outside the dungeons looks infinitely nicer than inside the dungeons, and roughly in your gameplay time, I think you're probably spending ever so slightly more time in the dungeons it depends how much you explore, obviously, but I would argue if you're mainlining this game, you're probably spending just slightly more time inside dungeons than outside, but I'm sure that changes player on player. It's strange that the theming is decent in the dungeons. It does get better than those first 2 dungeons, like I was saying last time, but there's still such a stark contrast between like the gorgeous like overworld design compared to the dungeons, which, as thematic as they are just such a step down from like some of the water effects and the lighting, and like the water on the beach. It's really, really impressive, and obviously the frame rate, there's issues, but like visually it's just an incredible looking game. And I'm kind of an opinion now where I don't know what future 2D Zelda looks like. Are they going to stick to this art style? Are they going to reinvent the wheel yet again? Are they going to remake another 2D Zelda? I'm interested where they're going to go next, and I'd be happy if they did choose to remake another Zelda, like a Minish Cap. Who knows? I don't know, just some other 2D Zelda in a similar art style, or some new art style, I think would go down a treat, maybe slightly near the end of the life cycle of the Switch. Who knows? Because I think that this game has proved that it can be done really well, and I think other than that frame rate issue, this game's pretty damn great. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, for me, I think if a future iteration of either a remake or a new 2D Zelda, which is something we've been calling for a while, is like, okay, what are they going to do next? Like, they do seem to like take these steps forward with Breath of the Wild in the 3D iterations, but it's been a while since we've seen a bold new direction for 2D, and I imagine like if they were to do Oracle remakes, they would reuse this art style, right? Because it is calling from that same Game Boy lineage. But Zelda as a series has traditionally always gone in a bolder direction with its art styles generally. I do think that they've landed on a sweet spot where Skyward Sword was going in a direction and Breath of the Wild kind of comes from that same direction to some degree. It feels like an amalgamation, a mixing of almost all of the previous 3D Zelda art styles when you look at Breath of the Wild. But yeah, 2D, I think they would, if they were to do a brand new game, do something completely different yet again, right? Whether that be something that is more cartoonish or more realistic, I imagine they'd lean more towards the the way that they've gone with this one, with the toy-like design, but do something completely different, because Nintendo do like their weird art styles. They like their arts and crafts with Yoshi and Kirby, and even Paper Mario to some degree is down that lineage. So Paper Zelda, who knows?
Yeah.
What happens if they remake Zelda 2 as their next project, right? Because that is a side-scrolling game. So how do you represent that? What does that look like? I think that would be fascinating to see.
Very large elements of 2D side-scrollers, parts of Link's Awakening that I think looked fantastic and were great. And there's even a couple of bosses you're fighting in from a side-on perspective, which was cool. Link's Awakening, fantastic game, and we'll see what happens next. But really cool that it came out this year, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think it was good to go back through it. Even though I played it relatively recently, it was still 3 years ago, so I think I was in a good sweet spot. I think we both were to some degree, where like we'd played this in the last half decade, and so we have a memory of what to do to some degree. So it made, I guess, it a bit of a smoother experience for us, but we're not like super fans that are entrenched and know it back to front, nor are we new people coming to it for the first time. So I like to think we're in a good sweet spot to where we can kind of barrel through this game to some degree, but also appreciate like the great things about it and the bad things about it.
I think I did play it before Link Between Worlds, and Link Between Worlds is like the smoothest, not easiest, but I guess it is an easy game, but it's a very smooth experience as a 2D Zelda, and like playing Link's Awakening.
You played Link Between Worlds first, because that game came out just as we started the podcast. Link Between Worlds came out in November of 2013, so you played Link's Awakening either 2014, 2015, either of those years, I
Wow.
believe.
Yeah, because I mean, Link Between Worlds is just the smoothest Zelda imaginable, almost in my
Absolutely.
view. And like, this game is definitely, there's some harder things to work out, some harder moments, even with the owl statues, even with the telephones. There's some stuff where you're like, okay, how does this work? Like Eagle's Tower, for example. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Link's Awakening, great game. Very glad I played it. Another game that I have beaten in the time since we last spoke is Untitled Goose Game, which has been making all sorts of headlines.
Man, the internet fucking just took this and ran with it, didn't it? Like, I didn't expect this game to get this much traction, like this level of... I mean, it's very meme-worthy, right? But I think it's transcended what I think its initial potential was to a huge degree.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and I think everyone, as reviews came out, and there were some review scores that were maybe slightly lower than the expectations that people had. My expectations going in when I finally got around to it were maybe ever so slightly lower than they initially were when we knew of Untitled Goose Game. But I actually had a really good time, a really great time with this game. I mean, the formula is essentially you play as a goose, and you move object X from A to B, and it makes Y happen, more or less. There's some stuff in between, like you can honk in between, you can flap your wings, you can do other stuff, and the timing of how you do these tasks is paramount on how they unfold. And there's light elements of stealth and making sure you're not spotted and these sorts of things. So you are given a list of things to do, and then you have to do all the things on the list, and then you move on to the next area. And there's 4 main areas. And then like a 5th kind of half area that's like the final area. And it's a really strong formula. It's not a very long game, but it's just a really enticing world. Like there's a real English theme to this game. There's pubs, there's like a little English garden, a little English shop, there's phone boxes and letter boxes that are very red and English, and cricket bats and cricket balls and cups of tea and pints of beer, and it's just a really small town English setting, which I hadn't realized about the game before.
Do you abide by the theory that you are just hassling a bunch of Brexiteers in like some hodunk English village, and that's the real joy of this game?
That is a really great theory.
It's one that's been posited by a few people online that I've seen.
I like that idea. Yeah, no, who knows? It is, if you know the UK, it is definitely the style of village that is probably far more Brexit prone than Remain. But
yeah, it's like kind of Middle England, very, very Middle England.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of England looks like that, especially in the south. So
right,
it's quite hard to put your finger down on, in particular, where it is.
Yeah, but like you've seen a place like that when you go through the UK.
Yeah. So yeah, Caroline sat with me while I played this, and it was actually really fun, just sort of almost playing it together. And she'd say, "Oh, you need to do that. Why don't you try this?" And it's nice having someone else to suggest what to do, because it is sort of stealthy but also puzzly and working out what to do. So, for example, and this game is just laugh out loud hilarious. So one of the tasks would be get the kid to wear a different pair of glasses, and you're like, right. So there's this, in the shopping area, there's a kid running around. You're like, right, how do I get that kid to wear a different pair of glasses? I have no idea. So you're kind of looking around and you realize, oh, there's another pair of glasses in the shop. The shop has like a shopkeeper. So you have to make sure that the shopkeeper is like looking away, or you just have to stealth up on them. So there's loads of options. For example, you can take a leak from the shopkeeper, run into her garage. She goes after the leak, and then you just pull on like the garage lever, and the garage door will shut her in, and she'll be stuck in the garage for enough time where you can go and nick some glasses.
Oh wow!
But assume we've got the glasses, and then we're back at the boys. We've got our glasses, and we're like, how do we get these glasses on the boy? And then you realize that, like, unlike the adults, like other characters in this game who are they're not scared of the goose, they'll challenge the goose and will kind of force you out of areas sometimes, or steal the item back off you. But more or less people leave you alone unless you're in someone's property, essentially, like inside the pub or inside her shop or inside like the garden of the other guy. But the kid, because he's a kid, is actually scared of the goose. So you realize you can just chase this kid and start honking, and he will run so fast. Eventually, he trips and falls, and his glasses fall off. And then because he can't see with his glasses off, you basically take his real glasses away, and you drag in not his glasses, the other pair of glasses, and then all of a sudden he finds the glasses, puts them on, stands up, and then you get a big tick. And like the tick comes on the screen, and you move on to the next task. And it's just like
almost like a shopping list to some degree.
Yeah, it's a shopping list. But it is laugh out loud funny. Some of the things.
I mean, like that is your type of humor, right? As soon as you said the kid falls flat on his face and his glasses go off, like that's Bally 101 to me.
Yeah, it's the combination of the slapstick combined with the really incredible animations of the goose. Like if you are a fan of cute animals doing hilarious things, just a goose knocking over people and bullying people and stealing things and then honking and flapping and just acting like almost like a dog in some ways. It's very funny. Like it is hilarious.
And the goose looks really good. How does the goose feel? How's the running around as a goose in this game?
The running around's pretty good. It's pretty good. Like when you are running, it's a much larger arc you can run, so you have to be careful about when you're running, when you're not running, when you're making a noise, when you're not making a noise. It's really well designed. It really is. And like the almost the dioramas, the little enclosed areas you're in, there's so much going on that you really have to learn what you're doing, especially the final area, which is like in this pub garden. The first aim of the pub garden is to get into the pub. It's like because there's a bouncer on the door who's not letting any geese in, and you're like, right, how do I do this? And then you realize there's like
a geese specific bouncer,
right, exactly,
with a sign saying no geese.
And then you realize there's like an empty cardboard box, and you have to get in the cardboard box, and then you get carried in.
So some Metal Gear Solid going on here.
Metal Gear Solid, exactly. And then, but you can get spotted going into the box by the person moving the box, and then she'll throw you out of the box, and then you can almost comedically get back in the box instantly, and it just creates a real hilarious kind of slapstick style game. So
I know before this came out, we were kind of chatting about it, and I was like, well, I know that you sometimes have trouble with puzzles and games and getting frustrated at them, and to some degree this felt a little bit adventure gamey in terms of like the logic of like do this to cause this effect.
Yeah.
How did you find the puzzles generally in terms of your own level for them? Did you engage well with them? Did it help that Caroline was there helping you? And
yeah, it definitely helped Caroline was there, but on top of that, I think that it was only ever, say you get 6 tasks per area, it was only maybe ever 1 or 2 tasks that I would need to look something up. And I'd basically say to myself, right, me and Caroline are going to try this for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, I'm just going to look it up.
Fair enough.
I'm just going to make that my own deadline with that, otherwise it's just going to drag on a bit, and it is a very short game. But
understandably, I think that you have come out of certain games with a more negative experience with them as a result of your own frustration with the puzzle design.
Yeah, definitely. But if you're going into this game and even in the very first area you're struggling to do the first few tasks, I think you will maybe not enjoy the later tasks, because it does ramp up. It does get more precise about where you need to be and when. And
is it like timing and stuff like that? You have to be fast on, or
some stuff? Yeah, sometimes, but like not often. Like it's a very laid back game, and the people are pretty laid back generally. Like it's not like. They're not like on a very strict, quick circuit, and you have to absolutely nail it to reach your goal. Like it's often just, they're going to come back for that box at some point, but you just have to make sure you're in the box and hidden before she comes back, sort of thing. Or you need to make sure that, for example, there's like collect a group of items per area. So the first area is like create a picnic, and for the picnic you need like a flask of tea, like a banana or like an apple or a sandwich, and I don't know, like a basket or something, and you have to take all these items to the picnic thing. And it can be difficult to distract. I would recommend doing it last, because it can be difficult to distract the gardener long enough to move all of those items to that picnic. And that was often kind of one of the tasks that I found a little less fun than the others, and there was 1 per level, which were always quite time consuming, but others of them were more fun. And it was like, where on earth is there a toothbrush, for example? How do I find that? And kind of working out where things are. And I'm not going to spoil the finale. I'm just going to say the finale is really well done. Like it is just on a number of levels, it's very well done. I was pleasantly surprised and was like, that's a really neat ending to what is overall, in my view, a really neat game. Like I think it gets about an 80 on Metacritic or something, and I would give it maybe a bit more than that, or just around there as well. Like it's pretty great and hilarious, and it's again, it's not a top tier game, but it gets so much credit for doing something new and different and interesting, and it's a really refreshing experience this year. And there have been plenty of refreshing experiences this year. Don't get me wrong, but it's just a real breath of fresh air, and so many funny moments, and it's quite a good game to just play with someone else who might find it funny looking at a goose.
Yeah, it sounds great. I definitely wanted to check it out, and like I was on the verge multiple times of getting it, and then it went away from its launch discount, and I'm like, because I was going to get it, it was going to be with the 25% launch discount, and then it went away. And I was like, well.
I found this with Cadence of Hyrule, but I've realized this year that I'm actually someone who's prepared to play a 3 to 5 hour game that does maybe cost like 12 to 18 quid. Like for me, that is still a good value proposition personally, and like I think there was enough in this game that was fun.
Yeah, I think for me the other thing working against it is the current state of PC gaming and
you got Game Pass.
It's Game Pass, the Epic Store. It's like Twitch Prime. Like I know that in August of next year I'm going to be given this on Twitch Prime, or it's going to show up in July on the Epic Store, or Game Pass is going to have it even next month or something stupid. And so stupid as it sounds, it has to some degree changed my buying habits on the Switch eShop.
Right.
And unless something is a direct exclusive like Cadence of Hyrule, it's unlikely that I will get it at a higher price, just because I'm invested in these other ecosystems where things are just handed to me on a fucking plate, and it's like, okay, well, I guess that's a thing.
Yeah. No,
cool.
I find that decision easier just because I don't own like a PC or an Xbox,
right.
And it's just a case of I could get this on PS4, I'm sure,
yes.
but it's better on Switch, and it's on sale. I might as well go for it, and it'll be a fun game to talk about in Game of the Year.
And it seems like it's one of those rare games that is kind of a 3D independent game that seems like it runs really well on the system and looks really good as well.
It does run. It's it's just a really clean, crisp art style, and the representation is great.
It just seems really well optimized as well, and that's the thing that you just don't see as often is just really well optimized Switch ports. So it's good to see.
And it's just a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. So I would highly recommend. It's very short. I did it in maybe 2 to 3 hours. That could take you longer or shorter. And there are like extra things post game I am yet to go back and do that I might do at some point. New tasks open up. So if you want to do all the extra stuff, it is looking at more 4 to 5 hours, which is decent in my view. So yeah. Goose Game. I'm glad to have played it.
Great. Excellent. Well, then let's talk about some things that I've been dipping into. I have played some What the Golf, which is a game that I talked about a little bit. I don't know if I mentioned that much, but I had a Apple Arcade subscription for like a tiny bit of time because my mum was here and she had her iPhone, and it was the only device in the house that could get Apple Arcade. So I was trying it on there because you get a 3-month subscription. So I was like, just check this out. Played it for 40 minutes, and I went back to it the day after, and it had deleted my save. So I was like, well, this sucks. I don't want to play through all that again. And then I got a review code sent to me for the version on the Epic Store. I'm like, great, I'm going to record some footage for this. I'll do a video review of it. Played 2 hours of it, and then it also deleted my save.
Deleted on 2 different systems?
Yes.
Man.
Which fucking sucks, let me tell you what. Especially with a game like What the Golf.
Yeah, it's all about that experiencing new things, that first run through. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. And like, not to discredit going through it again, but it's less enjoyable because you know the joke, you know the gimmick. So much of this game is predicated on the gotcha moment of like, you think you're going to hit the ball, but actually the golfer flies across the pitch instead, and now you're just pinging him about. This game is just endless jokes. It's endless references to other video games, whether it be Angry Birds or Flappy Bird or Mario or whatever. There's a whole section with portals from Portal. It's just full of really good humor and actual really good feeling mechanics as well. So to set it up, basically what the golf starts out, and it's this 3D kind of golf game. The art style is similar, I would say, to Untitled Goose Game. It has like a crispness, kind of a clean aesthetic to it, and you just hit the ball in the hole and it goes in the hole. And then the next level is you pull back, and instead of the ball being hit, your golfer goes flying, and now you're throwing the golfer as the golf ball. Next level is the golf clubs, and now all the golf clubs are going. Then you're doing like 20 golf clubs at once, and it keeps building and building and building, and keeps upending your expectations. And it's something that initially you could find as grating, or potentially goes in a direction where it's just the same thing again and again. But it's just so fast and snappy that as soon as you've seen one, you're just on to the next, and it's constantly reintroducing new ideas, doing twists on old ideas, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so much fun for the amount of time that I've played it. Now here's the problem: it's like that stuff is great, as I said, first time, but now I've played the first 40 minutes at least twice through, so going through it a third time just feels like I'd be going through the motions, And
it's probably like a 2 to 3 hour game, or
no, I think it's like 4 or 5 hours.
4 or 5,
because I played a couple of hours of it, and it said I was about 45% through the game. So I probably had 2 more hours or so, or maybe 1.5 or something for the main game, because I think the percentage counter is not just your progress through the main campaign, it also is probably tied to the sub objectives, right? And so every level you go to, it's kind of this hub world, which is an overhead view, and you access areas by completing levels, and like you're pinging yourself around this hub world, and each level is like a mini kind of golf hole that you go into, and then it loads up the level. And the idea being that each level itself is split into 3 different categories. So you've got the main one, which is just the easy thing. There's no par or anything. It's just finish the level, do the objective. Then there's the second objective, which is get it in a certain number of hits. So it gives you like a par 3. Do it in a par 3. So you have this giant sofa, and now you have to get this sofa to hit the pole in 3 hits or less. And then the final one is like a twist on the idea, because it could be a completely new idea. A lot of those have really surprised me and been like, wow, this is actually worth me going through, because it's completely different to what the original idea even was. And so I found it really worthwhile to go and do some of that stuff. So I did a good amount of it. And again, it's one of those things that's frustrating, because like now I'm going to have to, if I go through it again, have to do even those parts again. I feel like at this point they've hopefully patched it properly, but it's a real bummer. I want to be so effusively positive about this game, and I don't think you should naturally take my experience as like your potential one, but I would read up on this potentially before you buy the game and make sure they fix the issue, because I think it's really worth going through, and I want to finish it really bad, but I think I'm going to have to...
Is that not like a suspend feature on either your mum's iPhone or like on a PC in any way?
Oh, no. Yeah. PC doesn't... Like, that's the glorious thing about Switch. So this game is not out yet on Switch, but it will be out on Switch this year, and I hope it runs well. I hope it's a good version of it. You'll probably be able to use touch controls, because the iOS version obviously is built around touch, and the PC version I was using my mouse, which is like a touchscreen. I'd say that's probably the best way to play it. You probably could use the analog stick, but if you're going to play in handheld mode, I'd say use the touchscreen. So yeah, it really is a joy, and it's worth playing, and I think my own situation is just frustrating me, if you know what I mean.
Just come back to it, like maybe once you've forgotten it a bit more, or
potentially something along those lines. But yeah, I don't know that there's much to it outside of like, yes, it's jokey, and yes, it does feel good to play. I think mechanically it is pretty sound, and it is balancing a lot of mechanics. It's having to model a lot of different physics systems to constantly be throwing new ideas at you. The game starts off at this 3D perspective, but then all of a sudden you have a side-on 2D perspective, and you're doing an almost side-scrolling golf game, or there's a level where it's first person and you're the ball in first person. Like, it really builds on those ideas, and it's not okay with staying in its singular idea and sticking with it throughout and just slightly iterating on it. It really is a Mario Galaxy-esque approach of, here's an idea, let's throw it away. And here's a new one, and we're throwing that away. And there are parts of the game where it builds, and it does stick with a theme for a while. So there's like a football level where you are hitting this football, and there are these little weenie like children trying to kick it away from you. So you're almost like dribbling the ball up this pitch past all these kids, and that's really fun because you can freeze the ball midair, and sometimes if it falls off the ledge, you can still get it back on. Yeah, and so it constantly shakes things up and really twists and evolves. And often what it will do is it will build an idea for a few levels, then it will twist it in a way that is really unexpected and funny and gets you again. So yeah, What the Golf is really good, and I wish I could say I played the whole thing and give it a wholehearted recommendation, but I would be wary about the issues they've had around that, because Dan Reichert, who did the Quick Look on Giant Bomb, said his had been deleted as well. So it's not me being unlucky. I think this is a widespread problem that they need to patch, because that kind of sucks.
And if they don't patch it, then at least when it comes to Switch, you can just suspend.
Yes, do that. Don't. I would say just play this game all the way through until you're done with it and just suspend it, because I have a feeling, they launched on iOS and this was a problem, and then they launched on Epic and it was still a problem on PC. So, we'll see. It might be a little longer before it comes to Switch, but I think probably by the end of this year, and you can check it out.
Nice.
The other thing I did was I finished up Astral Chain, a game that I started when we went off to America, and so it's been on the back burner for a while. Came out end of August, so it's been like almost month and a half or so. And yeah, I'm pretty positive about Astral Chain overall. I really enjoyed taking my time with it. A lot of the game, because the chapters are long, because they are procedural in like a detective way in some senses, and there are all those moments where you're wandering around doing side tasks, doing side quests before actually engaging in the main stuff. I just enjoyed being quite leisurely with it. Like, I wasn't having any time pressure to finish it. I was just kind of going along, and I think it's a game that benefited from taking some breaks from it, because yes, the combat is really good, and I do like a lot of the kind of extra things you can do. But by the end, it does get a little samey. It does get a little bit, okay, let's wrap this up. Let's kind of finish things off. And, I think a lot of people complain about the aesthetic of the astral plane, like the place where you spend a lot of time. And yeah, it's a fair complaint, and it's valid. I did still continue to enjoy a lot of the puzzle work they did there, and a lot of stuff you have to figure out. Some stuff got a bit frustrating, but it was, in the end, pretty satisfying. And the narrative wasn't anything that was that important, and it was really weird. Like, right at the end of the game, you have this character who you've been playing as this whole time, and this character is a mute, doesn't say anything. So your brother or sister, depending on what gender you choose, is the character of the game, essentially, who has the voice dialogue and stuff like that. And like, the end of the game comes, and there's this voiceover, and you realize that the voiceover is your character, and I'm like, what the fuck? Why did they do this? Why did they, at the end of the game, give my character dialogue when they had been a mute this whole time? And like, there's quote-unquote emotional moments at the end of the game, and none of it lands. It does not land at all, because this character that you have taken control of has zero personality, isn't a character, and so the stakes they're involved with and the relationships they quote-unquote are supposed to have don't feel meaningful at all.
Some radical character development right there.
Yeah, like, it's really weird. But I do think that in Grand Platinum style, they pull off the big spectacle stuff right near the end, and it's like, okay, here's a giant fucking thing that looks like now we're in space and we're just zooming across crazy things and nonsense is going on, and that's good. That's what I look for in a Platinum game. I want it to awe me. I want to feel tiny with a giant thing. Bayonetta was so good at that, and Astral Chain continues to be in that vein, continues to go down that line of what Platinum is best known for, which is just neck-breaking action that you can't really stop for anything for. And when Austin Walker was talking about this game, he bemoaned the idea that it was easy to some degree, and I didn't feel that way, mainly because I'm not as good at Platinum games, and so playing it on the standard difficulty was actually a good challenge for me. I found it pretty fun, and it's the first time I've done a character action game like this on a normal difficulty. I usually just play them on easy, but I played it on normal as per his recommendation, and it was more a challenge, but I actually enjoyed that challenge, and maybe I'm starting to think that potentially I should start to branch out and play these games on a bit of a higher difficulty now, because yes, there were moments where I was frustrated because it felt like I was, there's certain bosses that put me in a situation like, oh god, I'm stuck in this corner, I can't get out, there's no way for me to roll, I'm just like, being jammed up against a wall. But for the most part, it worked really well, and yes, I was switching a lot between my different legions and using their different powers for maybe the first half of the game. But in the second half, I did kind of do what Austin ended up doing, which is just focusing on one. And that didn't seem to punish me, right? Like, I had fights where I'd end up with S rank or S plus rank, and I wasn't being very creative. I was kind of just using the same moves again and again. But it's because it was effective and it worked, and it kind of didn't necessitate me going in a different direction. The game sometimes gives you opportunities to use other legions, so certain enemies will only be affected by the dog, for example. Like, the dog legion is like a sniffer dog, like police dog to some degree. And there will be enemies that burrow themselves in the ground, and those enemies will be shielding other enemies. So the shield means you can't actually attack those other enemies, like they're protected. So you have to send the dog to bury underground to get the little drone out to get rid of its shield. So it definitely pushes you in the direction of using other legions, but what ended up happening was I'd use the legion for that one task I had to use it for, then I just go back to my sword legion, which was the most powerful and did the most damage, etc. So I ended up not actually experimenting that much, and I feel like the game is maybe a little bit overripe with systems. Like, a lot of the special attacks I forgot about and didn't need to use. It wasn't necessitating me, even on that standard difficulty, to go further than I had to, right? It felt not necessarily button mashy, but that I could just kind of stay in my lane and not move from it, and I'd actually be fine. I'd get through the fight and be okay at it, and even get rewarded for it by getting S ranks and things like that. So yeah, I think overall it's a game that I was interested in, mainly because of it convinced me it was a Monolith Soft game when it was revealed. And after that point, I was like, okay, I like this music. I like the look of this game. I want to check it out. And it's not necessarily my game, but I really did have a good time with it. And I think for me, it nails a lot of the game feel stuff that I like. The little things, right? Where you take your legion to mop up red matter. Red matter is just the shit that's just strewn about all the levels in the game, and every time you pop out your legion and kind of vacuum clean it up, it just feels really good. I love that feeling of collecting stuff, and like the best feeling in this game that I tweeted multiple times is collecting cans and just throwing them in the bin. Just like collect 20 cans and just stand there mashing the A button as you throw them in the bin. Great animation on it, feels good. Just these tiny little gameplay things that are not consequential, but make me as a player just enjoy playing the game more and enjoy being in that space. So I think Astral Chain nails a lot of that stuff, even if it, falters on the story side or maybe some of the length issues and pacing issues that it potentially has. But yeah, I'm glad I played it this year. It's a real cool thing. So
Sweet.
Yeah, that's Astral Chain. And yeah, I think that's going to close us for this segment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after the break to talk about our next Backlog Club game, Wave Race 64. Don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Alright everyone, welcome back to the second part of the show. As we had mentioned before, we are doing our Backlog Club finally for Wave Race 64, which we had been working on for a little while. Obviously went to America and stuff, so it's taken us a little bit to get into this game, but we're finally here, we're finally back, and it's time to talk about it, and talk about whether or not I can overcome my prejudices against Wave Race to some degree and enjoy a Wave Race
What
game.
is your history with Wave Race, MBZ? Why don't you go first?
Right, so Wave Race is a series that I've never had any affinity for.
There's three games. My cousin got the Game Boy game, actually. I remember him buying and playing
Game Boy game?
It's Game Boy. It's a top-down Game Boy game. And
holy shit.
Top-down racers like Micro Machines and that is handled like that.
That's really crazy.
There you go.
I had no idea about that. That's really weird.
I never tried. I mean, I tried it once on his Game Boy, but I've never really got into it.
Interesting. So I mean, the game that I would have the most familiarity with is Wave Race Blue Storm on GameCube, because I would come around to your house and you would be like, hey, play this game with me. It's going to be really fun. You're going to love it. And I would lose.
That's exactly how I sold games.
Yeah, and I would lose all the time. I would not be able to control anything. Look, here's the thing. Growing up, when you're friends with Bally growing up, okay, he is a racing game player. He loves racing games no matter what type they are. F-Zero, Mario Kart, Wave Race, all the core Nintendo racing franchise.
Played a lot of Burnout at the time as well, yeah.
Right? Or any type of game where you can win in first place from being faster than other people and having better control of a vehicle. Bally, that's his shit. That is 100% his shit, and he is always better than me every time. So I, oftentimes when we were growing up, felt like never wanting to play these games because what's the point? Bally's gonna win. I don't enjoy them. I never have a good time, and I can't control them. I think my real problem when I was younger was I didn't understand that you had to use the break button. It's kind of like in fighting games where we didn't understand that block was a useful thing, or in Pokemon where we didn't understand that Swords Dance was a good move. It's like, if you're not doing the main thing of like going fast or attacking someone or punching someone, then why would you do that, right? And I think that's when we were younger, that was our attitude towards how video games played. Obviously, in the intervening years, we figured out that, hey, defense is good as well. So learning control of a break button and things like that is something that I've gotten used to.
So Wave Race doesn't really have a break button, but I see
No, it doesn't. Well, and we can discuss that when we get to it. But, for example, like, in the intervening years, I was eventually able to beat Bally at my favorite Mario Kart game, Mario Kart 7, more often than not, which is why he probably resents it so much.
More often than not.
Yes, there was a period of time, Bally, and you don't remember this, but I fucking do, because I was winning when we would go online with Mario Kart 7, and I would win most of the races. And you don't remember this. You probably have repressed memories because you didn't want to admit to yourself that I finally beat you at a Mario Kart game. It's the only Mario Kart game I've ever been.
If that was the case, I certainly recovered handsomely for 8 and Wii. But
true.
Okay, fine. I see this narrative.
Yeah, no, it's a true narrative. In any case, that my perspective on Wave Race is it's a game that I have never had any interest in because my experience when I was younger scarred me, and I never wanted to go near it again.
But then democracy made you play it.
Yes, exactly. Of course, the truest, the flattener of all planes, democracy. So going into this, I would say skeptical. I was like, well, we'll see how this is. It seems like it's not the type of game.
You were skeptical whether you were going to play this for more than 20 minutes before getting frustrated and
maybe.
This is too much.
Definitely, like there was a skepticism about the game itself because it's like, am I able to even beat this on one Grand Prix or whatever? Am I going to go further with it? How am I going to find it? And we'll talk about how I found it, but let's talk about your history with Wave Race, Bally, as you are the savant here.
So I picked up 2 games for £30. One was Simpsons Hit and Run, and the other was Wave Race Blue Storm on the GameCube.
Simpsons Hit and Run, that would be a good backlog club at some point.
Yeah, I picked both those games up for £30. A couple of years after the launch of GameCube, maybe 3 years after the launch of the GameCube. Blue Storm was obviously a launch game for the GameCube, and when I picked up this game, I just absolutely loved it. I'd already been playing a lot of Burnout 2, a lot of Mario Kart Double Dash, F-Zero GX, and like, as you said, I was very into my racing games, my driving games at that point in time, and Wave Race Blue Storm really, really impressed me. Like, it was very challenging, but like, it was so good looking, and it ran so well on the GameCube. And
in line with us as 12-year-olds, impressive water physics / good-looking
water. With impressive
was,
water, my God, it is some good-looking water on the GameCube version. And it's funny I say version because like, I would say that it's a very similar game to 64, actually. But
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, in many ways. But
is it more fleshed out, or is it?
Blue Storm has more racers. I think you have like 8 to 12 racers. I think it might be 8 racers. It's got more tracks.
Okay.
I think there's far more racers to pick between as well. I don't think there's actually any more modes. There's like a training mode, which is quite helpful for the stunt mode, where it will actually teach you in game how to do those stunts, whereas I know this game doesn't. In the same way, we can get to that. So I definitely did like a little bit more stunt mode with Blue Storm than I did with 64, but mainly my jam was all about the racing, and Blue Storm, it was just a fantastic racing game. It also had a boost mode in Blue Storm, so there's a button to boost, which doesn't exist to my knowledge in 64. Maybe I missed it, but yeah, there's no boost in 64, so that was definitely
so almost like having a mushroom in Mario Kart, but you just have was it like a recharging boost, or how
so
did you get it back by going through or past buoys or whatever?
Exactly, you go through buoys, or buoys, as like
yes, we should say that for our American listener, that word that is spelt B-U-O-Y, we don't call it a buoy, we call it a boy. That's how you pronounce it here.
Yes.
Stupid, I know, but that's what we do.
Yeah, and the like your support staff in Blue Storm are much more vocal. Like, they constantly are talking like, "Oh, well done, you missed that. Oh yeah, you got 1 lap to go. You're 2 seconds behind." There's like just a much more constant chit chat, whereas that was, I think they chat to you a bit in 64, but maybe not as much. We can get to that as well. But yeah, I played a lot of Blue Storm. As few modes as it had, I did play a lot back in the day, and it's a very, very good game.
Okay, cool. So going into this game, neither of us have played it before, essentially. Neither of us have experience with Wave Race 64. I think this is the Wave Race that most people will have known / grown up with. I think I imagine the 64 version did better.
It made bigger waves than Blue Storm.
I'm not sure how I feel about that pun there. Yes, I imagine a lot of people will have had more experience with this version over any other version that has come out of the series. And of course, like, we've not seen anything of the series since the GameCube game. So similar to F-Zero, it has been MIA for a significant number of years.
And this was 1996, which is like...
Really? Wow.
When did the 64 come out? Like,
it was 96, yeah.
96, yeah. So it's like really early doors of this.
I wonder if this was... It wouldn't have been a launch game, because 64 launched with 2 games, I think, but it would have been a launch window, most likely.
Apparently it released in September in Japan, and then November in North America.
Okay,
and
so
probably
yeah,
like 2000 in Europe or something. I don't know.
Right, exactly. God, fucking the way that worked. Animal Crossing, save us. So the version we played was the Virtual Console version on Wii U, and this is actually the first time I think that I have played an N64 game on Virtual Console on the Wii U. And it's real weird, right? Because the way that they retain the original aspect ratio and everything means that a lot of the screen size is just gone. It's this tiny little square on the screen when you're using an HD TV. And so it feels weird to me. That it feels weird that there's no way of expanding that screen size. I looked a lot in the menu to see if there was a way of doing so, but I didn't come across one. Because I remember on the DS, like, you could hold down buttons and change the size of GBA games on the bottom screen or the top screen, or even change the size of DS games on 3DS and stuff like that. But you
change the color of like Game Boy games on the 3DS. But yeah.
Right, and resolution, like doing original resolution versus blown up and stuff like that. And a lot of collections do that these days, whether it be the Mega Man collection or Contra or whatever. They'll let you stretch and widen and whatever you want to do with it. But it seems like N64 games on Virtual Console don't tend towards that in any way, and we're just talking a little bit about this, but I know from having listened to a lot of people talk about it that the Virtual Console situation on Wii U, when it comes to N64 games and Super Nintendo games in particular, is not great. Like, those games don't look very nice on the Wii U, and they have this kind of muddiness to them. Like, they don't have the crispness that you would want of emulation of those systems, and so I think the game still looks good, but definitely is a little more underwhelming because of the kind of muddiness of the emulation when it comes down to it. So for me, it was just a little weird. And I know you've played N64 games before on Wii U.
Yeah, I played Crystal Shards, Cadbury Crystal Shards a while back, and yeah, it's one of those things that's very jarring initially, but once you're into the game, it doesn't bother me too much.
And I think that was the reason that when I first started playing, I was like, I can't play this on the gamepad. This is too ridiculous. So I was playing on the TV, but then I eventually got used to it, and I was like, I can play this on the gamepad, it's fine. Like, it's okay. It is just one of those initial impressions, like, wow, really? I'm going to have to play this game on this tiny little thing? It feels like I should almost have a 3DS or a DS playing this as opposed to big fuck-off Wii U gamepad. But yeah, I think the Wii U gamepad as a controller is actually really nicely designed for a game like this.
Yeah,
it feels good with it.
I played it all mainly on the TV and like with my Pro controller, and yeah, it worked well. And we should say, like, what's really great about the Wii U Virtual Console is the implementation of, like, you can make any button any other button, like you can assign buttons, and there are save states, and you can access the manual, and like there's a real polish to that Virtual Console that I think across NES, SNES, N64 that is just
the framing
really crisp.
of the Virtual Console is good. Like the save stating ability, the speed of it, and all that stuff is good. I just wish the emulation itself was a bit tighter, you know. Cool. So Wave Race 64, do you want to give like top level thoughts overall, how you kind of felt about it, and then we can maybe dive deeper into details?
Dive deeper. It's just
God, I swear to God, I'm not intending to do
waves
this.
If we're diving.
Oh, Jesus.
It's fun. But so I was very, very skeptical that this would hold up with like Blue Storm, which for me controlled really well, looked incredible, like it had very impressive wave mechanics, like the wave height between races was a really big deal. And this game really actually ticked more of those boxes than I had imagined it to. So my initial impressions were, once you get used to the fact that this isn't obviously as crisp as Blue Storm because we're talking 1996, but had I played this initially in 1996, I think it would have blown me away. Like, but even today, I think it held up incredibly well. And my impressions were that, like, this feels just as good as Blue Storm, and this is not what I expected. And from that point on, I just had a blast with this game generally.
Great. I haven't really talked to you about my opinion. What I
know. I'm interested. I haven't really shared mine either, so we've really not talked about it a lot off mic, whereas with other backlog clubs, partly because they've taken longer with like RPGs. Perhaps we've definitely
It's like what do you do here? Here's a tip here and stuff like that.
So yeah, I'm really intrigued. MBZ, what were your top level thoughts?
So here's my revelation about Wave Race 64. I really fucking like this game a lot. I really do. So I think a lot of it was a learning curve, right? So you start off and playing on normal, and I actually managed to beat normal my first try.
The first track is actually really nice because it's like a simple loop, and I don't even think that's the case in Blue Storm, for example. So that is like a nice thing for them to do. Yeah,
absolutely, and normal is actually pretty easy generally. You can not necessarily just win it, but you can get through it without necessarily needing save states, but I did use them because I was a little worried at the start. I was like, oh no, I don't want to play through this again and again. So I was using them, but I was actually kind of fine with it. And there were some races that I redid, but for the most part, it kind of eases you in nicely. Like, it gives you a good level of, these guys aren't going to be too bad, and I think over the course of the races, as the difficulties get higher, the tracks change, right? And like they add elements and they make things more tricky.
The angles of the boys definitely get tighter and harsher, and it makes a big difference.
Yes, 100%. That's one element of how they do it. But in this initial normal difficulty, they're placed in a way that makes sense, that's natural. And there are moments where it's not the end of the world if you miss one, right? Like you can get back into position even if you fuck up a little bit. I think what it really taught me to begin with is that this game is actually all about taking really hard turns. It's not about subtle movement. And I think I was worried because usually racing games, what happens is like when you're going around a corner, you want to find the right balance between speed and braking, right? To get around it smoothly in order to come out the other side, right?
Right, the apex, yeah.
But when it comes to Wave Race, it really is about being as tight as possible, just like leaning heavily into that corner, and making a tight turn because it'll keep you really close to the inside of the track. But also the way the vehicle turns is that getting out of that harsh turn is actually really easy. So when you go round hard, you can go back to being straight again without sacrificing too much. Like, you won't accidentally knock into a wall as a result of your momentum, just because the way that those vehicles are designed, it's like a motorbike, right? It's like the center of gravity and the way it works is so that you can easily take a tight turn but then get back to where you are.
You're actually occasionally pulling downwards on like the analog stick, which is very unusual in any racing driving game at all. Like, because you're forcing like pulling back on yourself.
Yeah, maybe subconsciously. I don't remember doing that, but I maybe subconsciously did not pull back, but maybe like a back and left angle almost.
Yeah.
As a result, yeah, that definitely makes sense.
It's interesting what you say about harsh turns, because I find it's a balance based on the spacing of the buoys. So what I mean is, like, for example, Drake Lake, there's like a straight line almost of buoys that you really have to weave. And I was really struggling on this track in hard mode, and it was basically I was trying to work out, like, do I want to bank harshly on this straight line to proceed, or do I just want to edge through it softly and do softer turns with a lot less gas?
Yeah, that is the other aspect, right? Because when it comes to those particular ones, I did find myself just kind of flicking the stick almost. Like, it wasn't a hard turn. And
I actually found you can actually do either. It's just your playing style. Like, I was able to eventually win by doing both methods.
Interesting. Because I would think on that, like, I did watch the CPU go through some of those turns, and they were doing really harsh, like, really quick turns. But I think you need to be really good at doing that, right? Because if you do the harsh turns, you can very much waste time, because you're going really far out, and you're coming really
more track. Yeah,
exactly. You are just inherently going more of a distance, as opposed to just going a bit more straight down the middle and just flicking left and right.
Right. Yeah, and it's that finesse that I had always enjoyed with Blue Storm, that with this game I was curious whether it would be as intricate, perhaps, and it
totally
100% is, and doesn't feel like a mid-90s game at all, in my view. Like,
no, yeah, it controls impeccably well for a game like this, and I didn't come in expecting that. I did feel like, look, I'm not someone who tends to like the feel of racing games generally, so give me an N64 game from back in the day, and I was very, very skeptical about it. But as with many classic Nintendo games, you feel the polish, right? You can go back to Mario 64 now, and it still feels really good to play that game. And I think, despite the fact that a lot of early 3D games look bad, on Nintendo's perspective, they still control really great. Whereas you can't say the same for Crash or Tomb Raider, or stuff on PS1 looks bad and also controls like ass. Whereas a lot of classic Nintendo, 3D era games,
maybe other than Donkey Kong 64.
Well, yes, there's
not that
there are exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, lot of first-party Nintendo titles hold up in the control department, and that was something that kind of, I probably should have expected it, but I didn't. So I was kind of very pleasantly surprised when I realized that this game controls really nicely. And I think it is that dichotomy, right? It is either the really hard turn or it's the really subtle soft turn. It's rare in this game that you just do a normal turn, like it is both of those extremes. And I think that's the interesting thing about this game, because it's kind of not like anything else I've played in terms of that approach to the race.
I agree completely. Like, it is very unique amongst racing games, amongst driving games, for the fact that, like, water is not a track. Like, water is liquid, and
it's dynamic.
It has different wave heights. It can trip you up. It's almost closer to like a snowboarding game in the idea of carving snow than it is like a driving game. But it still has that driving game sense where you will still have points where you'll see a buoy in the distance you have to get round, and this is a good example where you might want a harsher turn, where you will want to accelerate as fast as you can towards that buoy, and then once you're at the buoy, you'll do that tight turn with speed and then go to the next buoy, kind of thing.
Yes.
So, like, and that's something that you wouldn't get in a snowboarding game, for example, where it's this weird marriage between, yes, I'm accelerating like a driving game to get to that point, but actually when I get to that point, I'm not going around the corner. I'm almost like carving out a route for my ski-doo thing in order to, like, come back on myself.
That's a good comparison. I feel like you always have momentum. Like when you're going downhill with a snowboard, there's inherent momentum with you going from, a height. Gravity is acting on you. And in this game, I never wasn't holding, double negative, the A button to accelerate. I was always accelerating, because you are able to still survive by doing that. Like it really makes no sense to take your hand off.
Really? Because I was doing that quite a lot just to get my speed correct going into a bank.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So.
I felt like it was a bit too much of a penalty because of how difficult some of these races are to take on. I feel like if you give them any leeway, they will take a mile and they will just go ahead of you, and it'll be almost impossible to catch up to them, especially in the harder difficulties.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Shall we talk about like the other racers quickly and then maybe go into presentation or?
Yeah. I mean, the game itself, right, is predicated around this idea that you have to. Okay, so I want to ask you about power. What the hell is power? How does it work? What does it mean? Because it was one of those mechanics that confused me for a while, and I think I've got a hold on what it is now. Is it top speed? Is that what it is governing?
Because I don't actually know, strictly speaking, and I don't know whether it's top speed or acceleration or maybe a bit of both. But it is something to do with obviously how fast your ski-doo goes.
Because there were moments, and this happened quite a bit to me in hard mode, where I would deliberately miss a buoy because it would get me in a better position. Like, it would give me a better position overall, and I would keep my place. And even though I guess my power was reduced, I would still, for some reason, be able to maintain a lead on whoever was behind me. Now, that wasn't always the case. I think it depends on how far ahead you are of your opponent. And it depends where in the track you make that decision, because if you make that decision in a point in the track where there are no buoys, I think about the really long turn you take at the end of the fortress level.
That's a fun turn to like.
Yeah, where there are no buoys at all, and so if you miss that last one, you might as well start over the race. You're screwed. But you can be tactical and strategic about it. There was a map during, I think it was on hard, and I think it was maybe the swamp level, where I would constantly miss a buoy each lap, and that would let me come in first because it was out of the way so much that I would actually save time by skipping it. And I think that's really interesting because inherently the race is about never losing power, about always getting around them. But interestingly enough, the game gives you recourse to mess up. Like, it gives you 5 chances to miss buoys, so that you in case you have slight errors. And you can actually use that to your tactical advantage by deliberately missing them so that you end up in a better place. And I thought that was actually really cool. But obviously it depends on where you are in the race and like how many you have ahead of you. But I found that a great choice that I could make as a player, and I wasn't actually punished for it. In fact, I was rewarded for it.
No, absolutely. And like missing 5 buoys seems. So when I started like Bluestorm when I was younger, I was failing a lot of races and like learning how to weave between buoys and missing them.
And I think generally the game is really harsh about that, because if you do fail, you get no points. Like, you retire. Actually, I think you just automatically retire. There was one point where I had missed all 5 and I didn't reload my save state quick enough, and it just retired me from the race completely.
Right.
And so I was just like out of the entire Grand Prix. And when this is like 8 races in a row on Expert, holy shit, it's unforgiving. It is so unforgiving. It is so unbelievable. I want to meet a child who was able to beat Expert when they were younger without save states and fucking congratulate them with a handshake, because Jesus H. Christ, any tiny mistake on Expert is going to ruin you. It really does.
It really does. I was just going to say before, like, learning how to miss buoys and not, it is a brutal learning curve in that sense, but I agree with you, like, it's...
This game, I think, a lot more than, say, Mario Kart, is about knowing the track intricately, because you have to know there's one corner I can't remember which one it is, there's one map where you come out round a corner and you're on two lefts, and so you're leaning to the left, and then after those two lefts there's a right. But if you take a specific angle diagonally, you can go directly straight through those lefts and then directly past the right as well. So knowing that, having that foreknowledge of the track is very important.
Yeah, or even like Southern Island, where the wave height changes between laps and completely locks off parts of the track. Where
that was one of my favorite things about this game, where maps will change dynamically, and the water level will reduce, and so something which was previously a barrier, now you can go under the struts and use it as a much faster way to get through.
So one really cool aspect that they added to Blue Storm that they don't have in this game is you could pick which race you race next, but the weather wouldn't change. So what I mean is that you are told what say your best track. So in this game it's called Drake Lake. In Blue Storm it's called like Aspen Lake. So say Aspen Lake is your best track, then you could say, well, I'm so good at that track, when the wave height is really bad and the weather's really bad and it's going to be choppier waters, a more difficult race by all accounts, I'm going to do the track I'm best at. And then you can wait for a really clear, calm day to do a much tougher track. So you could like strategically plan weather with which track you raced on. So
that's
it's just like
really interesting.
It's a cool thing. And like this game obviously does have like different wave heights and things, but I don't think there's that weather element in the same way, where I think Southern Island always has high waves.
Right, so every track will have its specific type of weather. Like the Fortress is always going to be rough waters. Like no matter what, you go, that first jump you do, you'll always be able to clear the barrier in front of you. But subsequent races round, like I kept testing this because I'm like, okay, I need to see where I need to be if I can take that big wave to go over it, and it was consistent that on the first lap you always make it over the jump, but on the second and third lap you have to kind of go around it almost. So yeah, and places like the first track you go to is always like nice and sunny and clear skies.
Sunset Bay, Dolphin Park.
I don't know. I can't remember the names of any of these aside from Marine Fortress, because let me tell you, that's a map that I did a lot. Played that one a lot on hard and expert, because it is unforgiving. I think it's unforgiving in a really harsh way, because on hard it first indicates to you that now there's a new part of the track that opens up and you can take this shortcut. I don't believe that barrier opens on normal. At least I don't remember it happening when I played through on normal. But there is a gate that's like a shortcut that you have to take because all the other races take it. But if you're barreling towards that wall, you're so used to, from normal, taking that turn to the left and going round the long way. But because if you're in first and you're barreling towards it, it's literally the last second that this barrier starts lifting, which is why I say that it is so important to know the map and how it changes before committing to doing a Grand Prix, because especially if you didn't have save states back in the day, it would be so important to play time trial and figure out, okay, what does this racetrack do? Because I need to be prepared when I'm 5 races deep and I've never seen this track before and I can't remember what to do specifically. I just need to have my brain wide.
And even as much as time trial will prepare you for the races, I was struggling a lot, especially more on hard and expert, where the other racers can really just like knock into you.
100%. I think it's the most frustrating thing about the game is the unpredictability of other races and how they interact with you and themselves.
Because one knock that knocks you off, or you miss it, or you run into a buoy rather than miss the buoy, like run into the buoy and you fall off your ski-doo, like it can just completely wreck the race. Like it takes such a little thing to go wrong for the whole race to be wrecked. Likewise, like hitting walls, hitting banks, hitting beaches, like really little things wreck you.
On normal, it's fine. Like on normal, you can still recover from that. But
that's true.
On hard, as soon as you start playing on hard, no, you might as well quit and start over, because you're not going to make it to the end with one mistake. And like, man, if hard is like that, then like expert is like another level to that, because
you like how it goes normal, hard, expert rather than easy, normal, hard.
Right, exactly. That tells you a lot about the game. Because like if hard is, okay, I can win these races if I don't make any mistakes, expert is like, not only do I have to not make any mistakes, I have to be perfect. I have to just absolutely find the optimal route possible to even be within shouting distance within coming first. I've come in first once in an expert track, and I've played those expert tracks 50, 100 times maybe
Wow.
over all of my replays of tracks.
Yeah.
So it is savage in a way that is a bit ridiculous, but with the hindsight of time and the ability to now play it in a preferred manner, which is having save states before races, I think it's much more forgivable, and I enjoyed the game a lot more as a result of that modern convenience. As we say a lot of the time, like just having it as an option just makes so much sense, and allows you to kind of get through without the worry and being able to see more of the game. That said, I haven't finished the game on Expert yet. I'm 5 races deep. I'm currently in first overall. So I'm basically, when I first started playing through Expert, I was like, okay, I'm just going to try and get the bare minimum. But then you get to the point where it's like, oh, fuck, I can't. Like, the game starts out being like, oh, you just need to come in third.
Then you have to all of a sudden start winning every race.
Yes,
like,
exactly. You're like, oh, you can come in third and advance. You can come in third. The game's like, oh, it's fine if you come in third. And then the game's like, actually, fuck you, come in second now. And
they were prepping for save states ahead of time.
Exactly. So then I had to restart my expert run and be like, okay, I'm not listening to you, game, anymore. I need to get at minimum second.
I mean, the tracks generally do get harder, so it's always better to try and win those first few races.
Yes, exactly. That was my point, is like, I need to come at least second or first in these first 3-4 races so that I can, if I get fed up by the end, be like, oh, it's fine if I come in third. Otherwise, it would have just driven me insane.
Shall we talk a bit about the presentation of the game?
Sure. I mean, it kind of ties into some degree. I want to talk about the waves of the game themselves, because
yeah, let's do that.
The wave physics, the way that it works and how it bounces you around is I wouldn't say realistic necessarily, but to some degree, yes. It has this great simulation to it that
realistic in an arcadey way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. In an arcadey perspective, it has that feel about it. And how much did you rely on using the B button? Because that's something I found out later on.
Right. So
we had one of our listeners write in about it actually and talk about how you need to use the B button. So this is from Jiff from our Discord, who said, you've got to make use of the B button. When you press B after going off a ramp, it'll cut down your air time and let you get back to speeding off. Also, for these watercrafts, letting go of acceleration doesn't really help you turn. You need to use B to push your craft into the waves to get a better gripped turn. Don't bother using R. So that kind of tells you that, and I figured that out after I had done something which we don't do anymore in video games. I read the fucking manual of this game. As you had mentioned, like, Bluestorm teaches you the tricks and things like that. If you're going to do stunt mode in this game, you have to go to the manual to read it to find out how you do any of these things, because the game doesn't tell you.
Because there's some really hokey, like, twists of the analog stick and
right, it's like when you're on a ramp, hold down, and then as soon as you go off the ramp, hold up to do a forward spin, or the opposite for a back spin and things like that.
But honestly, I knew all the stunts because of Bluestorm. Like, I already knew that.
So they're the
I
same,
can do the barrel
basically.
roll. Yeah, they're the same controls more or less for all of them. On the B thing, quickly. So with Bluestorm, I would have argued that using B is a really big deal, because there are some points, if you're running over waves where you're going into waves, holding B, and you can really see it a lot more in your character, they will kneel like low and get low in order to marry the weight of their body with the ski-doo in order to basically efficiently cut across the tops of waves. And that was a really big deal in Bluestorm, because if you didn't use B, occasionally waves were so big you'd literally get knocked off by waves. Like, not even...
that happened to me maybe once or twice, and it was usually after taking a really rough turn from a big wave, like taking a big wave, landing harshly, and then rolling off. But it did happen, but not regularly.
I found in this game, like, when I started the game, I assumed the control, it might have that move from, like, Bluestorm, and I would hold B and I wouldn't really see my character change position much, so I didn't really assume it did a lot. And then as I progressed and kind of got through races and waves would hit me and I just kind of go through them with only the accelerator A only, it wasn't really affecting me. So I kind of never even assumed it existed. So when I read Jiff's point on Discord, I was like, oh, wow, I didn't even really know that was a big part of this game. Because for me, I think just having played both this and Bluestorm, it was a much bigger deal. Whereas this, it felt like a lot more of a small deal.
Right. And it helped especially for me after looking at the manual and realizing that, because there are certain turns, like in Sunset Bay, you're right close to the beach, and doing a really close turn to the beach on that level helps you so much. It really gives you a leg up on the competition, because they tend to take a much wider arc.
So using B to go into corners.
Yes, exactly.
And that keeps your body low and turns tighter? Is that basically...
Yeah, I feel like that's the idea behind it, or it gives you more speed round the corner. Something I don't really know how it worked, but it tended to be that when I did that, I felt like I came out better from the corner.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that was a useful bit of knowledge that helped me as I went through, and I think it was nice to go back, and I think it's really good. Another part of the Wii U Virtual Console that is well done is that they include the original manual with all these games, so you can dip into them and be like,
And it feels so nostalgic and retro to look at. It's like, oh, this looks great. Like it just feels so like childhood.
I remember buying my GameCube, and the first thing you do with GameCube games is you pull out the manual, Star Fox Adventures, and I was reading how to do things. You just don't do that anymore.
When I was younger, I always treated a manual as like, it was my way to get into the game and enjoy the game while I wasn't playing the game. So I'd like bring it to school and like read it in my spare time, or read it just in bed before bed.
It was one of those things that when you were driving home from having bought the game, you would get out the manual and start going through the manual. Yes,
exactly.
100%.
On presentation,
yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Wave Race is the only semi-photorealistic, based in like the real world series Nintendo has worked on.
Excite Bike, I would say.
No, that's a very good point. Excite Bike, like Excite Truck, although that's a bit more crazy. But yeah,
it's more crazy.
But
you mean with just real humans as
with
characters?
Real humans on Earth, like
maybe I don't know. I'm sure there must be other stuff. I mean, Disaster Day of Crisis is a Nintendo IP. Technically, Monolith Soft made that game. There'll be examples, but
it is very rare.
I think in terms of major first party titles, you're right. Yeah, like
it's very rare, and I find like I just love the presentation of this game is what I was going to get to, and like for Blue Storm, it was a huge deal to me. Like I absolutely loved places like Sunset Bay and Drake. Well, in Blue Storm it's Aspen Lake. In this game it's Drake Lake.
Is that the one which is like there's no waves at all? It's just completely calm.
It's completely still. It's a lake. I think you referred to it as like a swamp earlier, and I was going to say that is not a swamp.
Right. I mean that's how I associated it, because it looks very brown.
It's like
and
a
green.
very it's quite a reed. It's got like ducks and reeds.
Man.
And,
you want to talk about a fucking track that made me shout "fuck you" more than any other one? On Expert, you have to go through the little wooden, poles in the ground.
Oh yeah.
In Expert, you have to fucking thread the needle through those to hit all of the boys.
Yes.
Wow, what a
on Drake Lake, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. At the end of that is rough. But
on Expert, it sucks. It really does.
I just think. And you know how Nintendo Capri-Sun's like, oh, I'd love to sleep there or stay there or this.
Yes, yeah.
I just think the Wave Race universe, as realistic and whatever as it is, like, it's just a really nice place to be. Like, it's sunny. It's like an autumnal kind of area. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to all these great locations and enjoying them.
Maybe apart from like a stormy fortress, which is a bit like, whatever.
Yeah,
but,
that's the one that reminds me most of like being by the sea in Scotland. It reminds me of going up north somewhere in the middle of a fucking storm, like all down to the fucking granite brick in front of you at the beginning of that race. It feels very northern UK to me.
But I really. It's kind of why I want not a remake or just another Wave Race game. I just want to see what Nintendo would do now and how they would visualize like a Caribbean sunset or Aspen Lake or whatever. Yeah,
I very well think they could really show off their graphical prowess with a Wave Race game for sure.
Exactly, because like everything has stepped up so much since Blue Storm back in like 2002, 3, 1 or whatever. It's been a long time, and like even Wave Race 64 in 1996, I just think it's just a lovely place to be. I think presentation wise it is really impressive and like is really really nice, and often
it's got really clear visual design as well. Like I think the boys stand out excellently. They're color coded.
Yeah.
You can see them really clearly. A lot of like the turns are pretty obvious. There's one section where you have to go through this tunnel that weaves left and right, and you know there are red arrows all across the wall to indicate for you.
Yeah.
And it's just very visually. I mean, not necessarily visually pleasing, though it is. It's just very clear with its visual language.
I think for the time, and this is another big difference between, it's not a big difference, it's a minor difference, but it's big to me, between Blue Storm and 64 is 64, and I think this was the right decision for the time, is they've got helmets on and you can't see their faces. And then Blue Storm, all of a sudden, you've got all these characters in full 3D, and it's you can really see their features. And then in 64...
Yeah, that's why I was kind of like wobbling back and forth about like real people, because I was like, well, they didn't model the faces of these people, did they? They just put helmets on them.
But they did, because you see them on the podium at the end of like a championship. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I just think is a really hilarious thing to do, but it was the right decision to put the helmets on. And I do think the jump between 4 races and 8 races mechanically makes quite a big difference. It can get very overwhelming, Blue Storm, in comparison to this game. As much as you were like moaning before about how difficult it is when they can knock you and put you off, like I think that aspect is made 10 times worse in Blue Storm. So it was quite nice, these clear, pristine tracks sometimes with just 4 racers going around them. Like there's something very perfect in my mind about that when there, it's that notion of there are just so many things go wrong in the stories of video games, and it's nice to sometimes step back and be like, you know, nothing needs to go wrong. We're just going to have a nice race on this in this picturesque Caribbean beach island, and we're just going to race each other.
I mean, you know, you can make your own meta narrative, right?
That's what I mean. Like I it's been some time since I've enjoyed the meta narrative of a nice place like Wave Race 64. That's what I mean. It was nice to go back to for this backlog club.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that restraint on having 4 races, probably a system restraint more than anything else.
Yeah, probably.
But it makes me not want to play Blue Storm even more if you're talking about, like, because some of the worst moments in this game were, oh, this guy accidentally fucking smashed his racer and now it's right in the middle of my path. I literally can't do anything about it. Yeah. The AI just fucked up and now I'm going to fuck up.
And the AI are very good at recovering and catching you up, whereas for us it's like...
Oh yeah, funny that they're able to just out of nowhere, but...
The rubber banding, I wouldn't say is awful, and it's maybe feels worse than expert, but like... it's fair in the sense that if you race well, they will not catch you. But the second you make an error, they're ahead of you. And
exactly. And that error can be as slight as taking a turn a bit badly. You know, like you can take a turn, but they can just get past you because they took it better. It is very it's strict, and that's what I'd say is like hard and expert in this game are just strict, and to some degree that is inherent in the design because this still feels born of the arcade era, right? It feels like this, if you're going to buy this game, you want to get value from it. How do you provide value back in the day? You make it really fucking hard so that they have to spend 50 hours perfecting it and learning it to get good at it, right? Because otherwise this game is so barren. Like there's hardly anything to it. It's 3 championships. You can unlock another one if you beat them all, which is like your traditional Mario Kart reverse mode, mirror mode as it were. And then there's stunt mode, which is just like a course for each of the races.
So I'm pretty sure that mirror mode, and I never unlocked mirror mode in this game, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in mirror mode in Wave Race Blue Storm, rather than reversing the track like an actual mirror like it does in Mario Kart, you are actually going around the track in reverse.
Oh, is that not what Mario Kart does?
No, are you kidding me? No, they flip it on in a mirror.
You're right. Mario Kart does do that.
Do you understand what I mean by the...
Yes, I know what you mean. And I think it makes more sense for this game than for Mario Kart, because imagine a race with the, on Double Dash with the giant DK barrel you go through that shoots you.
Well, exactly.
You can't like reverse back to that.
Whereas this is like, there's not a jump. There are jumps in this game, but there's not a jump where you're jumping down to another level and can't get back up.
Exactly. Yes, yeah. I would imagine, I've not unlocked it either, but I would imagine that it is just going backwards on the track.
That makes sense, because that's pretty sure how I remember it from Blue Storm. I could be wrong, but I could check that.
So yeah, those, as I was saying, it just, otherwise it feels like a very barren game. So I think inherently they had to design it so that it was super fucking difficult, which meant that you would get a lot of playtime out of it because you wouldn't be able to finish it on your first try.
I've actually, as much as I've not played this game on 64, I've played a lot of racing and driving games on N64. So I've played games like Hydro Thunder is a very good comparison made by Midway, which is also a water racing arcade style game, and actually started as an arcade game, I believe. But I've played that. I've played another, I call it GT Legend. I can't remember what it's called, but I've played another handful of driving games on the N64, and like F1 and whatever. And a common theme with all of them is that they'll have like a championship mode, a time trial mode, and maybe like one other mode. So this game, as crazy as it sounds, because of that stunt mode, has more modes than the bulk of racing games I've experienced on the N64, as crazy as that sounds.
Right, outside of Mario Kart, which is, it has 16 tracks, and it also has battle mode and things like that. So Mario Kart is probably the most fully featured, even though it's not the most fully featured Mario Kart.
Yeah, arguably, even though that's a very light game when we think about it, like in terms of games today. That's like was a legitimate criticism of Mario Kart 8 is like there's not a whole lot to do in this game as great as these tracks are, sort of thing. And
right,
it's like
right.
A real thing. And that's an area where I feel if the Gran Turismos, the Forza Horizons that just have gone in a completely different direction in terms of number of modes and the evolution of driving games, where I feel like if Wave Race did come out on Switch, it would have a championship mode, a time trial mode, and a stunt mode, and maybe one more mode. Who knows? But my point is, it would be very distant from your Forzas. It'd be very traditional style,
right? Unless they went open world with it, like Forza Horizon, and kind of expanded the scope of it, which I think would be a really cool thing to do. I think you could do some really neat stuff, especially with the stunt mode, which I loved doing. Actually, I had a great time playing through stunt mode and learning the tricks and trying to beat my score, because each race has like a top score. And it's not super hard to beat, but you just need to make sure that you're implementing, handstands and doing tricks off of ramps, making sure you're hitting all the rings. Yeah,
the handstands are just hilarious. Like, how can you handstand and drive one of these things at the same time?
It's absurd. But I can imagine a world in which you have a more open wave race game where there are mini challenges strewn around the place, where you'll have a little section where you go through some loops, and you'll have a section where you'll do a big jump off a thing to get to a secret. Like, I think that could be a lot of fun and really a way to bring Wave Race into the modern era to some degree. But I just don't know that Nintendo have a team that's wanting to make that right now, or have the capability to do a more photorealistic, as you said, game in this current phase of them as a company.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they had a similar attitude as they do to something like an F-Zero, where they're like, we put out a great game on GameCube. I don't know what more we could do with it. Therefore, we're not going to make another game. That horrendous excuse, even though they make the same game for a number of other series.
It's the ultimate Nintendo hypocrisy. If it makes them money, they're quite happy to do the same thing for years and years.
And honestly, if Wave Race did come to Switch, I mean, Switch is a bad example because Switch can kind of give life to any series that might be near its deathbed in that sense. Like, Switch is so going to be, or is in the process of being so successful that it has the potential to shine a light on a like Metroid Prime 4 could sell very well in comparison to, say, traditional Metroid Prime games. We don't know yet, but I'm just making the point that Switch is maybe a bad barometer, like bellwether to identify whether a game series can be successful or not, just because the Switch itself is so successful.
Right, exactly, because it's, no matter what, this will be the best-selling Wave Race of all time if it gets put on Switch. Yeah. Just because of the nature of the N64 and the GameCube not being as successful as platforms, and Wave Race just being an under-the-radar franchise. So yes, it's kind of just it's an easy win if they were to do that. But interesting you brought up Forza, because I think Forza had a big impact on me enjoying this game as a result of having played a bunch of that earlier this year. I think it taught me a lot more about control and taking turns and things like that, and the nice thing about Forza Horizon is that it builds in a rewind so that you can, if you make a mistake, practice and go back and do that. And my God, I wish this was on Switch. Like if there was an N64 Switch Online thingy like they did with Super Nintendo and NES.
It might come.
It might, but one of my favorite things about that implementation is there's now rewind functionality built into those old games.
That'd be good for this game.
And let me fucking tell you, if there was a game that ever needed rewind functionality, it is Wave Race Goddamn 64, because the frustration I felt upon being on the third lap of a race and making that tiny error and being screwed out of the place I was in.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because it feels like save states are fantastic and like they work for this game fine, but I always associate save states a bit more with like a JRPG or like an RPG. Like when it comes to action games, and this is obviously very much an action game, that rewind capability just feels a bit more appropriate than perhaps just starting the entire race again.
Like with Contra, when we played Contra 3, we had to make sure our save states were in specific downtime places where we could take a breather and then go into it. Because if you save state in the middle of a fight, you're fucked. Like you can't do that. So that's why the rewind functionality is so much better in that style of game.
Yeah. So like for Contra rewind ability, we could have just rewound every time one of us made a stupid mistake or something.
Exactly.
It could have been a bit more logical. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, and I think that would be, honestly, if they were to do a new game like this and they did have this level of difficulty with it, which I imagine they wouldn't, I think they would kind of rein it back a little bit.
Oh, I hope they'd keep an expert mode in the back.
Well, yeah, no, I'm sure they would do that, but you know, I don't think it would be a bad thing to just build in a rewind mechanic. I think the idea that Forza has done that and it hasn't changed it, like it's a thing that you can put in the game that people don't have to use. Like hardcore racing players, I doubt they'll use the rewind in Forza. You know,
arguably that like the difference between casual and hardcore, to my knowledge, is like a big reason why they went for like the Horizon series in the first place.
Yeah, no, you're right.
You know,
yes.
like so.
But I do believe the standard Forza games have that feature in them as well.
Sure.
So it's not just this,
absolutely.
off spin or offshoot or whatever. So yeah, I think that would be a great boon to a new Wave Race game were they to do it. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed that.
I do worry that Wave Race is at the back of the line when it comes to list of Nintendo properties they might bring back, you know, in terms of like we're talking about F-Zero, Star Fox, Advance Wars. I'm sure all these games are higher on the list than Wave Race, unfortunately. But
well, who knows, right? Because they do tend to do weird shit. Like, who would think Sakurai would bring back Kid Icarus, a franchise that had been long forgotten?
That's very true.
Nintendo are often known to dig into their catalogue for the weirdest deep cuts. Why is Takamaro's Ninja Castle in Nintendo Land? Who the fuck knows, right? Like, it's just what a strange deep cut to go after, and yet they do that from time to time. They're a weird company. You can't predict them, so I don't think you can necessarily say that Wave Race is the back of the line, because I don't know that there is a line. You know, don't know the line exists. It's just it's more of like a. It's more of like a bowl of marbles, and Nintendo just stick their hand in and pull one out. That's the more of the analogy I'd use in this case.
But yeah, you're right. Wave Race is definitely one of those marbles, so who knows?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you didn't really mess around with the stunt mode that much.
I kind of had my fill of stunt mode from Blue Storm, I felt. And
I think this is a case of Mario Kart Battle Mode where it's a thing you don't care about.
It very much is. I'm in it for the racing. Mainly. I did go into the mode and just sort of messed around with like some of the tricks, and I almost had like a weird muscle memory from Blue Storm where I was like, I'm pretty sure this is like riding in reverse, and I was like, oh wow, okay, right, it is. And then I kind of like looked up a few things and tried out the other stunts, and yeah, it's cool, it's fun, I get it, and like, but as you say, my view is very much similar, in line with like Mario Kart and Battle Mode. It's fun, it's cool, I like it, I'll do it occasionally, but I'm all about the racing pretty much.
Yeah, I just really enjoy doing that. I wish it was a bit more expanded, but as we've said, this game is...
Then you should try Blue Storm. Have you wanted to play Blue Storm as a result of this? Like, would you borrow Blue Storm from me and give it like a go if you ever had like a bit of a GameCube renaissance and got it out again?
I mean, I'd give it a shot. I would prefer if Nintendo remastered it for Switch, you know, like just do one of those jobs.
But it's sort of like, it's one of the first ones you might jump to if there was like a GameCube Virtual Console or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this has definitely raised my curiosity and piqued my interest far more so than I expected it to, and yeah, I have to say I did thoroughly enjoy playing this game.
It's really good to hear, because I was quite skeptical when this won the poll. I was like, oh dear, here we go.
Yeah, well, I mean, we chose 3 games that I was inherently, they weren't my lane, right? They're all racing franchises.
But in terms of like a game with systems to learn that is rewarding, and I've not played Excitebike, and I've not played F-Zero on N64, but I think the Wave Race as a series, like there's something very rewarding about learning.
Yeah.
It's got, like I said at the start, it's a very unique form of racing. Like that marriage between essentially a snowboard with a motor is a bit how I described it before. It feels very different.
To me, it really is the inclusion of the boys as a mechanic, as a thing that, like, you have a secondary goal almost. It's not just about the race. And I think this is partly why I like something like Excite Truck so much, is that there are secondary things that aren't just coming in first. And, obviously you have to come in first in Wave Race. But what I'm saying is, like, there are tricks in Excite Truck that are a different thing that you can focus on, and not just focusing on the straight racing of it. Mario Kart similar, there's items and stuff, but when we're talking about
the tricks to the racing in a very unique way.
Yes,
but
it does.
Something like a Wave Race, if Wave Race came back, they could try something like that. For me personally, I wouldn't like that, but
and that's one of the things that I really was surprised by, is that they put so much focus on these tricks in the manual and be like, look, this is a really deep system, and you barely get use of it unless you're playing stunt mode, because it doesn't behoove you.
You're allowed to use stunts during regular racing. But
like, why? There's no purpose. It doesn't give you points.
Well, there's a replay mode in Blue Storm that is very fun.
So it's showboating,
to watch you.
basically.
Yeah, when you're in the lead and you're doing barrel rolls off the jump, it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, okay. No, I definitely appreciate that, but there's no mechanical benefit for using those tricks in the middle of a race, and I think that's another thing they could do in a sequel potentially, is build that more into the actual racing. But I think as I was saying, the inclusion of the boys as an objective that you have to go after, it feels like, going through rings almost. It feels like a Pilot Wings approach in some senses, that I enjoy having. That is the primary objective, because if you don't go past them, then you're going to fail. But also, it's a important secondary objective that you have to do. And so I think that's why I connected with it a bit more, is that, you're not just learning the turns, you're learning the turns as they coincide with the boys. And as the races get harder, Sunset Beach, whatever the first race is, they start putting spiked balls.
Yeah.
And you have to avoid those. So they ramp up the difficulty, and as you said, they ramp up the tightness and the sharpness of where the boys are placed, so that you really have to relearn the track almost. So it's a really smart way of utilizing the same base track, but twisting it in the other difficulties with something that's not speed, right? Mario Kart it's the same track, but they're a bit faster this time.
Yeah.
Whereas I really appreciate that Wave Race actually fundamentally changes the way you approach the race depending on the difficulty. Yeah. That's a really smart thing to do.
Shall we read a comment from a service on Discord?
Yes, go for it.
On the difficulty. I've been very impressed with the difficulty curve of Wave Race 64. When I started playing, I was consistently coming exactly second. First place eluded me on each and every race, but I was still competitive against the other racers. I don't think a racing game could pitch its difficulty much better than that. Then as I started to improve, getting to grips with how to make both sharp and gentle turns without losing speed, the game's most intricate mechanic, as well as learning the layout of the tracks, I was able to win a few races and eventually win consistently. All this was on the lowest difficulty. I hope as I start to play on the higher difficulties, this process of starting competitive but not dominating and eventually getting good enough to win consistently carries over.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely right about normal mode. I don't know that is the case for the harder modes. I think it may be the case, but it may be the case that it will take you 20 hours to get through that difficulty, right? Like it is definitely much harsher, as we've talked about, and so the process of getting better, I certainly felt it. I certainly feel now so much more confident with the expert tracks than I did before, but it's taken me banging my head against them 12, 15, 20 times in a row in order to do that. And even then, like this morning I was playing a track and I could not for the fucking life of me come in second. I couldn't do it. It was eluding me like nothing else. And I was doing great runs. I was doing them almost perfectly, like minor things that I messed up. And then one run, the third and fourth place dudes who were ahead of me, they just crashed into each other, and I just went round them. And then I came in second, and it was really
RNG.
I was RNG. It was the mistake of the AI fucking up that let me get through that. And I think you would really have to have the perfect run at my skill level without making any mistakes, with things going in your favor all the way through these 8 races in order to complete it and to win at the end. And obviously I don't have to worry about that because I'm just save stating and doing each race as it comes. But to do that without the luxury, without the fallback, it seems intimidating to me in a way that I don't know that I would have gone through with was I younger playing this as a kid.
Yeah, it's tough. I found that my success with this game kind of peaked at around the same level as it did with Blue Storm, which is basically somewhere between hard and expert, essentially.
Yeah.
And I've not kind of brute forced expert yet with like a series of save states, but I'm tempted to go back and do that with this game. And like,
I think it's worth seeing some of the devious shit they do with those maps.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
I kind of want to go through and finish expert, if only because it unlocks the final track. And that's the thing we haven't talked about, is that there are things you can unlock in this game, and they're tracks. So going through normal mode unlocks all the base 6 tracks. You unlock another one when you beat hard, and you unlock another one when you beat expert, which also unlocks them in the stunt mode and in the time trial mode as well.
Right.
So you can't do the stunt mode until you've unlocked the final track. So it's a little bit of a shame that I haven't got to that, but you know, it seems a bit ridiculous seems a little harsh to lock that entire track behind beating expert, which I don't know how many people in the world managed to do back in the day.
Yeah, it's cool. You got any wrap up thoughts, final thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't really mess around with any of the handling stuff or the grip or the speed. We did get a
yeah, I went totally vanilla as well. I'd always gone with Ryota Hayama, I think his name is.
Just the main dude, yeah.
He's the main vanilla
I played as
Japanese
the
dude.
female character. Another fun thing about her is that there's physics to her ponytail. So she has a ponytail that sticks out the back of her helmet. And so when you're bobbing around, her ponytail will bob as well. That's a nice little extra if you play as her. So I thought that was fun. But yeah, and Jiff in our Discord also had given tips about where to put the handling and stuff like that, and said like set it to lightest handling, speed 3 notches to the right, and default grip. And I tried that and it didn't work for me at all. So I just went back to what I had been doing.
Yeah, I always found that with Blue Storm as well, that like the high top speed people with the low acceleration controlled like a floating elephant. Like it was just it was just horrendous. Like some of the turns that they couldn't do basically. And the high acceleration, low top speed people felt very like there are still like long straights throughout most of these tracks, and you really do need a high top speed at those. So I always like going vanilla, like Ryota Hayama, the Mario of this game for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's you. That's what you'll always do.
I'm gonna do it. I'm just saying, like, I think it works for this game perhaps more so than a Mario Kart or another racing game.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I mean, Mario Kart has stats, but I hardly ever pay attention to them. It's like, choose this kart and this wheels and this.
Oh, really? I really like getting into all those things, but not with this game, but with Mario Kart I do.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't make a huge enough difference for me to care, but you know, there is certain setups that I will prefer to others, but it's not like something like this where I think it's much harder to figure out the minutiae of it, right? I think Mario Kart is a bit more obvious in how it feels with different karts. I don't know that I felt it being that much different, but what I felt was I was too slow and I couldn't even catch up with people. So yeah. Well, anything else? I think that maybe wraps us up.
Bring
I guess.
back Wave Race. I love it. And I'm so glad you got something out of this game, Emize, because
totally.
It was far closer to Blue Storm than I could have ever imagined, and I'm so happy with it generally. And I just really want to play some more Wave Race, like on Switch, please.
And I think it looks really good as well. Like, it is an N64 game, but I think the simplicity of the visuals and the way the water is modeled just the way that the water works for a game of its time is way more impressive than I expected it to be. I really didn't think it would be this complex. And it can screw you over. Like, the dynamic nature of it means that there will be times where you'll be shouting at the screen because an unwanted wave will knock you off course and it will
put you onto a
mess
beach
you
or
up.
something. Yeah, exactly.
Right. But that is kind of the nature of this game. The nature of it is everything is against you. Like, it really is, everything is against you. The races, the elements, all of it. Like, missing boys.
The position of the boys, it's a lot.
The hazards, like, it is really you against the world, and that's why I think getting second has never felt so fucking good in a video game. I'll tell you that. Like, truly, getting second in expert feels like you're the king of the world. And
I do like the idea of survival through the Grand Prix rather than just topping the Grand Prix. It's about hanging in there.
Exactly. We didn't really talk about that, but this is not a game where you expect to win every race, and like with Mario Kart, the goal is to come first in every race. The goal here is to just fucking live till the next one, just get enough points to continue going forward. So yeah, that's it's a great way to look at it, and I think that was a great kind of chat about a very interesting Nintendo game from the past.
Very much different game to the kind of other Backlog Club games we've talked about. So it's nice to do a racer.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. Well, excellent. That's another one in the bag. We probably won't do another one for the rest of this year. It's going to get busy. There's lots of games. But we'll take a look maybe in January about thinking about what to do next. If you have suggestions, you can also send those to us via our email address, which Bally can tell you now.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We keep a document up to date with all our Backlog Club ideas, and then we think about what games we're going to put in that next poll, so do let us know. And ideally we like to try and play games that neither of us have played before, so maybe try and keep up that trend at least for a little while longer.
Absolutely. You can obviously tell us suggestions as well through Twitter. You can follow our Twitter account, which is @TNL Podcast. That's @TNL Podcast. And we give you stuff there that's like, hey, here's the latest episodes come out, here's some Patreon thing that's happened. Keep up with us there, and also chat with us, tell us some ideas you have potentially for the next game to do for Backlog Club. You can also find me on Twitter @LordNBZ, where I will be continuing to talk about my books I'm reading and things like that. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter @Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. I'm just gonna keep retweeting GIFs. Not GIFs, short videos, I guess, of Elizabeth Warren, because she's great, and I wanna share her with the world.
Yeah, no, fair play.
She's fun.
Great. You can obviously find us in lots of different places across the internet. We are on Patreon. Patreon is good, and we would like to thank some people who have helped support the show.
Yes, thank you to our two $10 tier patrons there, of course, my fiance Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you for your support, and thank you to all of our other patrons. We hugely appreciate your support. You really do keep the show on the road. And yeah, we've got another episode of TNL Ranks coming out a week today, assuming you listen to this on Monday. And yeah, we've been going strong as we get closer to the end of the year.
Fantastic. Yes, we are on lots of different podcasting things. You can find us on most podcasting apps. You download podcatchers, it's what they call them. Spotify, TuneIn.
I haven't heard them called podcatchers in quite some time.
No, there was a little period of time where everyone was using that lingo, but now, not anymore.
It's not like we record this podcast through Skype or anything that all the kids are on these days.
Yeah, no, we definitely don't use Skype at all. Nope, not. Yeah, we're on Discord. That's true. I mean, we are on Discord. You can go find it there. We never really plug our Discord. The Discord link is in the description to the show, as is links to our email and things like that. So you can always find that stuff there. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Bally, plans for the next couple of weeks? What are we playing before Luigi's Mansion 3 comes in?
I mean, it's kind of like the rest before the storm. I think I need to get back into some Fire Emblem Three Houses and hopefully play something short along the way to talk about for next time.
Yeah, I'm also back on Three Houses. I'm trying to do one of the other runs of the game, so I'm trying to blaze my way through that a little bit.
What made you want to play this other run of the game at this point in time in particular, or just...
Because I have been going to the gym and playing my Switch, and I want to listen to a podcast, but play a game where I don't have to pay attention to it. And because I'm going through Black Eagles again, I've seen all the support conversations in Black Eagles, so I don't need to worry about any of the story stuff.
That really is 3 things at once then. So you're,
it is,
so you're on the bike, right?
Yes. Well, it's either on the bike or it's walking up a steep hill on the treadmill. I don't run and play because that's too much. That's too intense.
It's too jumping up, yeah.
Yeah, but walking, because, man, Switch is the perfect console for the gym because the 2 Joy-Cons, you just hold them in your hands. It's great. So, yes, that's why...
I just want someone to be inspired by you and, like, sit on the bike next to you and then they get out their Switch and copy.
Oh, my God. That would be the greatest thing. Oh, man. I did that with 3DS at uni. I talked about that on the podcast doing that.
And it didn't go well.
Well, it's just...
Your hands got sweaty and it kind of...
You get a lot of sweat on the 3DS, whereas the Joy-Con is like, you can get a bit sweaty, but then you can put them down. They're separate and you can like wipe them off and stuff. And if I get like a new pair of Joy-Cons, then I can be like, hey, these are my...
Yeah, you're already getting a bit of drift.
Sure.
Why not get a bit of sweat in them?
Keep the old ones as my gym Joy-Cons.
Gym Joy-Cons.
And just have the new ones, you know?
Hashtag gym Joy-Cons.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Cool. Well, yes, that's going to... close us out. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back very soon with some more Nintendo podcasts for your ears. Goodbye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Sandy Beach from Wave Race 64, copyright Nintendo 1996. Love Return
I'm so
of the Jedi.
pumped for Return of the Jedi.
It's the best Star Wars film.
It's the best in that trilogy by quite a way, in my view.
I mean, it's just the best Star Wars film overall, for me, personally. It's my favourite.
I'm 3/6 just.
Nah. Return of the Jedi is always going to be more special to me because I'm a dumb kid who jumped off my sofa to be Luke Skywalker. Like, that is my favourite scene in all of Star Wars, when he does the flip.
I was telling Caroline about us pretending to be Han and Jabba in episode 4 and you were sleeping bag and she just lost it.
I forgot about that shit.
Laughing.
Oh, it was good.